It wasn't even humiliation. It was erasure. I was sitting at the end of a long glass table that overlooked almost the entire conference room, including the part where the sandwiches we were all afraid to take first were placed. My chair squeaked a little, and I nervously adjusted my dress, a blue one with pockets that I usually save for important meetings or awkward dinners with my ex. Today was both categories at once. The room was too warm, maybe from the density of fake gratitude. Maybe it was because we all knew what to expect. Or at least we thought we did. "So," said Roger, our CEO, with that corporate smile that smelled like a PowerPoint, "we've been thinking about who to appoint as COO for a long time, and after a careful analysis, the decision is obvious." I didn't breathe, not because I believed they would say my name, but because I was afraid to believe that they wouldn't. "Chris, congratulations," he said. Chris, the one who asked me every week how to convert a PDF to Word. Chris, who used to put his phone down face down in meetings because, and I quote, "GPT is doing everything. I don't have to go into it." Chris, who ordered a latte for lunch and left a napkin in the cup. "Thank you so much, Roger," he said, as if he had won an Oscar. "I couldn't have done this without the support of each and every one of you, especially Fran. As I lifted the plastic champagne glass, a nerve crunched inside me, like a spine from sitting too long. But I smiled. Because it was not a moment for emotions. It was a moment for fixation. To remember who was sitting on the left, who clapped the longest, and who gave a look of apology and then looked down. 12 minutes after the speech, Roger handed me a bonus, a card that read, "We appreciate your work. $500 for 12 years. I signed it on the back. I smiled. I said, "Thank you," although in my head I thought, a $42 per year valuation of my life is something new, even for this circus. If I ever believed that a person's value was measured by results, it was a belief that was killed in me on that Friday at 1643. I was 58. That is, already at the stage when you are no longer called promising, but not quite retired enough to stop being afraid of a sudden optimization letter. I came to Northbridge Freight at 46 when my daughter had just gotten braces and my husband was trying to escape the third wave of the construction crisis. For the first 3 years, I was a logistics analyst, but I was actually the one who was patching up the holes. Tables, routes, cargo plans, maps, Excel files from hell. Everything was mine. And no one was particularly interested in how I did it. The main thing was that everything worked. I remember one night when the server went down at 3 a.m. The managers were already preparing to lose a client from Denver, and I was sitting in the office in my pajamas because I simply didn't have time to change after the call. I manually rebuilt the shipment system. By 6 a.m, the logistics were working again. In the morning, Roger wrote, "Great job. It would be nice to automate this later." Later never came. After that night, I started writing my own system, first as drafts, then as a prototype. No one asked me to. No one paid for it. But when we merged with Allied Connect a year later, it was my system that stood up to the pressure. They took it as a basis. Do you know what the tragedy is? When you rescue, no one remembers that everything could have collapsed, only that everything ended well. That's why when Chris said, "Thank you to everyone who supported me," everyone in the room clapped. Because for them, he is the face of the department, and I am his invisible support. That evening, I went home, took off that annoying blue dress with pockets, and for the first time in months, I opened a bottle of wine without an occasion. I didn't cry. I sat at my laptop and opened a file called systemcore_version _4_5. It was on my personal disk, and there was neither the company logo nor Chris's signature, because none of them had seen this version yet. I turned on the music, my favorite track from the 80s, and I said out loud to myself, "Okay, Fran, now listen carefully. No one must know that you know everything. You will not fight. You will build." On Monday, I turned on my computer as usual 10 minutes before 8. A meeting was already waiting for me on the screen. Logistics Integration Project Status Update. Chris was leading the meeting now, with a new profile picture and with a new title, COO Chris Lindstrom. I opened a chat with him and scrolled through his history. The last time he wrote to me was a month ago, when he asked me how to enable filters in Excel. I didn't answer him then because I was on the road. He never repeated the question, so either he figured it out himself or decided that he could do without filters. At the meeting, he talked about reviewing internal processes and optimizing the delivery of tasks through a dynamic route network. I listened and realized that he was talking about a function I had written 6 months ago. My code. My brainchild. But now it was wrapped in shiny corporate rhetoric and presented as if someone had pressed 2 buttons. And of course, the whole team should be thanked for integrating these tools so quickly, he said, leaning slightly toward the camera, and especially Fran for her analytical support at the start. At the start, if I had a pen in my hand, I would have broken it. The next day, I worked late into the evening. The office corridor was quiet, the computers were turned off, and only the light was on near the window. It was Luis, the senior server maintenance technician, an octogenarian old man who launched the first modem here back in 2002. "And you're still here?" he asked, not looking up from his monitor. "Something's gone wrong with the logistics. I'm checking the routes. And you?" "The servers were down for 2 minutes. Nothing serious. But you know what?" He lowered his voice. "The new guys are getting into places they shouldn't. Protected files, access logs. I wrote it down." "And what are you doing about it?" "Nothing yet. But I noticed that someone was opening System Core under my login, and I was at home at the time." I froze. It meant only one thing. Someone was trying to understand how my system works. But without me, there are only empty wrappers. Because everything important was the version that did not belong to the company, the version that only I had. "Take this," Luis said, pulling out a flash drive. "It has access logs. Take a look. I don't have to sit here for 60 years. You can still make a difference." "Louis, thank you." "Don't thank me. Just remember that sometimes silence speaks louder than anger." The next week, Chris came to my desk with a smile that someone once taught me was called charisma. "Hi, Fran. Listen, you were building a logistics system, right? Can you show me where the report on route dynamics is?" I looked at him. He was holding a tablet with the main menu open, a dark background, a few tabs. Nothing complicated. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Well, I just want to see how she calculates the performance score. And why is everything so dark? Can you make it lighter somehow? Why is everything so dark?" "The color is dark because if you open it in a warehouse or in a truck at night, the white background blinds your eyes," I answered calmly. "And the assessment is not just one formula. There are 16 parameters linked to 13 tables. It's hard to explain in 5 minutes." "Oh, I see. Well, then just show me where to click to get the rating." I did. Then I turned on screen recording, just in case. I thought that the next day would be as usual. Coffee, the open window, people pretending that everything was normal. But someone decided, no, today we have a plot twist. There was a white envelope on my desk. No signature, no markings, just an envelope. It was not clear who left it. The cameras in the corridor, as luck would have it, were not working. A classic of the genre. I closed the office door. I pulled up the blinds. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a flash drive. No inscriptions. It was gray, like the ones they give away at exhibitions. But it wasn't from an exhibition. I could feel it on my skin, even before I put it in the port. It was Luis's flash drive. I recognized the same encryption key that he and I had used in the test versions of System Core 5 years ago. Everyone thought the system was freezing back then, but in fact, we were saving the log files in a double layer to check for real-time crashes. I started recording the screen, just in case something happens that will get me evicted from the office and not the city. The first click is the internal logs folder. The second is access IP logs. The third is to stop breathing. Everywhere. Connecting to the system from a non-company address. Host, bluebridgeconsulting.com. Oh, familiar faces. Or rather, familiar parasites. Bluebridge were temporary consultants during the logistics optimization. Temporarily, 2 years ago. They should have been disconnected from the systems long ago. I signed it personally. And here it is, an active connection. Through my module, through System Core. It got even worse. One of the logs showed access to the Falcon _segment beta structure, a module that I had never officially implemented. I was just testing it, in a separate grid, without making it public, but someone pulled it out. I sat down. For the first time in all this time, I was scared. Not for myself, for the system. If they took it, they could distort it, or sell it, or bring it down at any time, not understanding what internal connections keep it intact. This is not just analytics. This is a living structure. Without balance, it will retaliate. I opened an email client. I wrote to the only person I still trusted. Hi, Talia. Do you still have access to transactions with consulting? I need Bluebridge, and preferably, everything that has passed after January. The answer came back in 3 minutes. She didn't even ask why. The amount of transactions is $20,000 a month. Purpose: Falcon _segment _2 licensing. I closed the laptop. I sat down and looked out the window, and then wrote in my notebook. Step 1, undermine trust, but quietly. I hadn't clicked disable in the access scheme yet, but I had already marked the field for a controlled collapse. You're hiding something, Fran. I didn't even look up at Chris. His voice sounded as if he wasn't sure why he was here. He just wanted to check if I was still in the game. Just the calculations for the new routes. I'll send it after lunch, I replied calmly, not taking my eyes off the monitor. He stood there a little longer than necessary, somehow awkwardly. And then he left, leaving behind the smell of expensive cologne and an unpleasant feeling that he was smelling something in a different sense. I made my first maneuver the very next day. I called it the sin of omission. In the new Falcon update, I made some changes. Very small ones. Nothing changed from the outside. But the module started recording all user IP addresses in a new log file shadow _logs.txt, hidden in the subsystem. And I gave this file read-only permissions, exclusively for one person. Me. Next came the trust call. Talia, can you come out for coffee? I wrote to her in the messenger. We met in a park near the old Hive, the building where Northbridge began before it merged with the algorithmic group. Do you want to go on the record? She asked, holding a paper cup of almond latte. No, but I want to know who the payments go to, and for what exactly. Talia pulled a thin notebook out of her bag, a paper notebook, old-fashioned. I knew this day would come, she said. It's all in here. Falcon is officially registered to a third-party entity through Bluebridge. The contracts say it's a third-party algorithm developed by their research department. There is no such department, I said dryly. I checked. But besides, she looked up, there's another payment, to a private card, every month, $5,000. I didn't answer. Thalia added quietly, signature, consulting compensation. The recipient's name is Chris Martell. When I got back to the office, a scenario was already forming in my head. Chris is not just incompetent, he's a middleman, a showcase. He had to get a promotion, present it as the success of a young leader, and at the same time, sell internal tools to a third-party company, pretending it's a partnership. And as if I was just an average specialist whose work was background noise. But I was no longer in the background. I was in data collection mode, and I found what I was looking for. The next day, I received an email from the legal department. Please provide a description of the logic behind Falcon and your role in designing it. Dry. No good afternoon. No emotion. I knew what it meant. Someone was preparing a disclaimer, but I had already uploaded my version of Falcon to the local server, and I received an electronic certificate with the compilation time, dated 5 months before the first contracts with Bluebridge appeared, and with a signature, mine, from the algorithmic editor, a unique ID. It was a weapon, but I haven't pulled it out yet, because the most powerful thing is not to shoot. It's just to show that you have a finger on the trigger. I wanted him to know, but not everything, only what I would allow. On Tuesday at 9 o'clock, I filed a response to the lawyer's request. It was short, with technical terms, in accordance with the internal regulations, but without substance. In the language of companies, this is called an answer that does not raise questions but does not give answers. And then the game began. Are you free for lunch? Chris wrote on the messenger. Free? only for something worse than his body language. I replied, "Yes, I have a meeting with my partners at 1 o'clock." We went to a cafe across the street from the office, the place where he usually went to pretend to network with potential clients. "I can see that you are too deep in the system," he said, sipping water instead of coffee. "It's my system," I replied calmly. He smiled, but his eyes remained blank, like copper that doesn't reflect light. "Falcon is corporate property." "Falcon has a kernel that I created 5 years ago. It still works." "But you didn't patent it, did you?" "Oh, I knew how to answer that one." "Patents are an official war. I am in favor of quiet revolutions." That evening, I stayed in the office longer. Instead of light, there was only a monitor, green tea, and a lamp that hummed dully. I went to the internal forum of the technical department and published a post. "Yesterday, I found a third-party script in Falcon's code that makes calls to unknown domains. Does anyone have any idea who inserted it there? I've attached the logs below. It's not about control, it's about security." I did not sign my name. It was my old one, from my previous account, which was still in the system as "in the archive." The result was not long in coming. Is this a hack? Who has the rights to these IPs? There's a hole in the system, and we weren't warned? Is it related to the Data Secure Protocol? This is a conflict with the NDA. Are you aware that this is a financial risk? And my favorite, someone needs to explain this to management. Now. The next day, Chris was paler than his shirt. He called for an emergency technical session. "We're reviewing access," he said, trying to sound like a boss. "Someone in the staff has published internal code." "I saw it too," I said. "It's a problem, but I'm sure you'll figure it out." He looked at me with distrust, and I read in his eyes. He suspects, but he doesn't know how. And most importantly, he doesn't know how much I know. The same day, I sent an anonymous message to HR with copies of the logs and a request. Who is responsible for checking external connections to internal systems in accordance with the IT security policy? And she signed it. Concerned employee. The office number was not mine. I wasn't lying. I was concerned, but I did not panic, because all the panic was yet to come. Just not mine. I was waiting for an explosion, but it did not explode. It was seeping in, drop by drop, with a poisonous hiss. On Wednesday morning, there was a man in a dark blue suit in the lobby without a badge. People like that don't come for an interview. They come to check. There was an order to audit the security systems in the mail. It was signed from New York, from the central office. The subject of the letter, Response to Alleged Compromise of Falcon Infrastructure, Internal. Someone, not me, sent the log file to the central IT department. Someone, not me, wrote that the situation requires immediate assessment by external consultants. Maybe it was Talia. Or maybe someone who was no longer happy with Chris. 2 hours after the audit was announced, Chris called the technical team together. "I know you're all stressed, but we're going to find out who's behind the leak, who is damaging the company's reputation." His voice sounded like a read text, not confident, but practiced. I watched as he moved his marker across the board, drawing meaningless arrows, as if he wanted to create a plan of action that he didn't have. He didn't look at me, but he felt me. And here's the best part. One of the new employees, a girl from the QA team, said, "Can we just see who had the rights to the last commit to the Falcon core?" Silence. The marker had stopped. "I'll check," Chris said quietly. "But you know it's complicated. It could be an insider." And then I finally said, "And there are also access logs with IP addresses, and all transactions to the FTP server can be verified. If you need help, I can help you." He didn't even look up. He just spoke quietly. "We'll see if we need it." In the evening, I was stopped near the parking lot. "Fran," it was John from the risk team, "I want to tell you something. I don't know anything for sure, but I heard that Chris is looking for ways to minimize the consequences if something comes up, and that he, well, wants to scapegoat someone. And by someone, he means me?" John shrugged his shoulders, but that was enough. At 20:30, I went to the System Access Archive, not to delete anything, but to set a timer. a good old feature that allows you to automatically archive a particular user's access for a certain date. And I chose the night of Sunday to Monday. That's when the auditor has to make an official report. And the chosen target? Falcon_core is an account that Chris created for his own access so that he wouldn't be seen using his personal login. I knew because this login appeared the day after my demotion. I also wrote a letter. I'll send it later. But the text was ready. If my system has risks, I'm ready to discuss them. But if it works, I want the company to officially recognize its author and update the copyright information. Otherwise, I have the right to contact the Federal Commission for the Protection of Digital Assets. This letter was not revenge. It was a key, and I kept it in my pocket. Because when the real fire starts, I will open the door. He entered the meeting room 5 minutes before the start, but inside, it seemed to be too late. Chris sat down, squared his shoulders, and pretended to be in control. But his fingers curled into a fist when he thought no one was watching. But I did. The auditor opened the presentation, and the first thing he said was, "We have strong reason to believe that Falcon was accessed through an illegitimate account not assigned to any officially employed employee of the company." No one moved for a second. Even the air conditioner went silent. I watched Chris swallow his saliva and then try to raise his hand. "This must be a mistake. We've been using technical accounts. It's standard." The auditor tilted his head. This account had full access to the system and was also the source of FTP transactions to a server registered in Texas. We currently have no evidence that it was used with the approval of the central office. I couldn't take it anymore. Falcon_core? The voice sounded calm. "That's not one of the accounts the company creates. I think I saw a log in the system with that name. The date of creation is the day after the change of management." Chris tried to intervene, but was not allowed to speak. Then the auditor was asked, "What do you recommend?" After the meeting, Chris did not return to the office. His laptop remained in the meeting room. I saw it being packed in an anti-seismic bag. I knew that Falcon_core would be shut down on Monday, and with it, any influence it had on the system. I could say it was a victory, but it felt like the calm before the storm. The next day, I found an email in my inbox with the headline, "Falcon Systems Public Update." The sender was the company's CTO from New York. "We are grateful to all employees who helped stabilize the situation. We especially want to recognize the work of Ms. Fran Davis, whose contribution to Falcon's structure helped to avoid significant damage. An updated security system will be created on the basis of her developments. We are considering formalizing the authorship." I read it 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because the most important thing was missing. Not a single word about Chris. No thanks, no accusations, as if he did not exist. In the evening, another letter came to the post office. This time it was personal, from Chris. "I know who you are, and what you did. But remember, everyone has their weaknesses, and if you think you've won, maybe you just haven't seen the final yet." I didn't answer. I just deleted it. But I didn't forget, because it's one thing to survive. It's another to stay in the game while everyone else is playing hide and seek. No one announced that Chris had left. His account was quietly deactivated. Access to mail was temporarily restricted. His name disappeared from the project page. No one mentioned him at the meetings. And yet, his shadow remained. On Monday, I walked into the office and saw that a new user had appeared in our internal chat. CR with an unknown IP. It was like a ghost that didn't want to leave the stage. I sent an email to the IT department. An hour later, the user was gone. But I remembered the message he had sent. A system is not a code, it's people. And those who play in silence forget that microphones are two-way. I closed my laptop and concentrated. It wasn't a threat, it was a whisper. And a whisper is more dangerous than a shout. 2 days later, I received a call from a lawyer at the central office. "We want to discuss the terms of recognizing Falcon's authorship, unofficially for now, but with respect." I came to the meeting wearing a dark blue jacket, no folders, only with a head that remembers everything to the bite. Falcon is not just my code, it's my philosophy. I created a system that had to maintain trust. If it was used for betrayal, it's not a technical error. It's a human error. They were silent. Then the lawyer said, "We can recognize you as the architect and give you control over the next iteration." "And one more thing," I added. "All modules transferred to Bluebridge are returned, publicly. Otherwise, I'll turn the logs over to the Digital Security Federation." That was the moment when I realized, I'm not asking anymore. I am offering conditions. On Friday, a press release was issued. Following an internal investigation, Northbridge Freight is announcing a new team leader for cybersecurity. Miss Fran Davis will be appointed to the position of Chief Technical Advisor for the Falcon modernization. We are also terminating all contracts with companies that have had access to the module without proper vetting. The photo is of me, wearing the same blue jacket, without a smile, but with a look that no longer hesitates to be the first. And just when I thought the story was over, another letter appeared on my desk. No signature, no stamp, just a phrase. "The system was never yours. It is part of something bigger." And underneath it, a black USB was attached. I didn't turn it on right away. First, I made a copy. Then I opened it. There was no code inside. It was a video, a camera hidden in a conference room, 3 men talking. One of them is my former CEO talking to Chris, and at the table, a representative of the Government Logistics Agency. And the first thing he says is, "The system should remain non-transparent. If it shows all the routes, we lose control." I stopped the video, because I realized that I had just started to lift the curtain, and behind it is not only corporate treason. There is a political shadow behind it. I watched the video 3 more times. Each time, my heart beat like a chess game at the last minute, slowly, but so loudly that it seemed to be heard on the other side of the screen. There were 3 men on the screen. One was my former boss. Another was the director of the government's Strategic Supply Department. The third was silent, but it was he who handed over the folder. "The system should remain indirect," he said. "We don't need transparent accounting. We need manageable." I took a freeze frame, and then I made a phone call. Not to the press, not the lawyers, Talia. "I have a recording, not just an exposé, it's something more, and I don't know if I'm ready to make it public." She was silent. Then she answered, "Ask yourself, why did you start this war in the first place?" I was silent for a minute. Then she said, "Because I thought that honesty was not a strategy, but a principle." That night, I wrote a letter. Not an angry one, not emotional. It was just clear, with all the time codes, quotes, logs, and chronology. And I attached it to 2 addresses: the company's legal department and a journalist from the Digital Ethics Journal, with whom we had long ago discussed cybersecurity and logistics. And then I turned off my computer. And for the first time in years, I left the office not at 9 in the evening, but at 6:30. In the morning, the company's website was unavailable due to technical work, and on the main page of the Digital Ethics Journal was the headline, "The system that saw everything and was silent until its creator spoke." I got a call from the CEO. "Is it true?" His voice was as dry as paper that had just learned about gasoline. "Yes." "And you really didn't give us a chance to resolve this internally?" I inhaled, slowly. "You had your chance. 12 years. A week later, I was officially suspended from Falcon, with the wording, "To maintain objectivity during the external investigation." But it was too late. Journalists were already investigating. They started asking about contracts with Bluebridge, about shady transactions, about the relationship between private entities and government departments. And suddenly, it became clear that I was not a weakness, but the truth, which, as it turned out, also has a reputation. At the next meeting of the Government Commission on IT Infrastructure Security, I sat in the front row. As a technical consultant, I was invited, not by the company, the government. "We want transparency," the minister said, "and we want it to be implemented by those who no longer believe in silence." I looked at him and thought, the irony is that silence was my loudest weapon, because you don't always need to shout to break the system. Sometimes it is enough to press send,